I've always felt that when your enemy is about to implode or going down the drain, and if it does, sit back and enjoy the show. Inflation 25 to 30%.
Highest ever.
Yeah, and huge foreign debt. At a time when global world is becoming more and more technologically advanced, their labor force, about 60% of the labor force, is either illiterate or has just done class 5. How are they going to compete? They want, somehow or the other, India should give them a way out.
Is there anything that you would like to perhaps throw light on with regards to this K obsession that the Pakistanis have had?
That's ridiculous. You see, this is current history, that it is a Muslim-dominated area. The fact of the matter is, Kashmir was the home of Rishi Kashyap. It is the home of Shaivism. It has had strong connections to India and Hinduism throughout millennia. We also, in India, have forgotten this. How important Kashmir is to Indian civilization.
The situation has been such that you do have a section, it could be the PTI supporters themselves, but things are changing. Or would you say, no, there's no change in Pakistan?
So I have not seen this kind of mass movement, but there is no doubt about the support that Imran Khan enjoys. He's a cult figure. You see, I sort of use this analogy that in the army chief's office there is a cupboard. Right? In the cupboard, they have different hangers. So one hanger is Nawaz Sharif, Shehbaz Sharif, Mariam, Asif Zardari, Bilawal Bhutto, Imran Khan. So when the army chief comes, he puts the old hanger back and takes out a new hanger. Chalo bhai, isko ab bana dete hain.
I want to ask you about the Guardian report, because a lot has been spoken about it.
What shocked me about the story was that the word alleged and allegations have been used 10 to 15 times in that article. Sometimes twice in one sentence. They mentioned the name of the research and analysis being as R capital then AW. This is a typically Pakistani formulation, Ra.
Hello, welcome. You're watching Republic Podcast with me, Shravan Sen. Today I bring to you a very, very special guest. The reason why I say special guest is because I would say he's also one of my favorite authors. And ladies and gentlemen, often you would see on television, day and night we speak about India, Pakistan. But not often do you get an opportunity to understand the ramifications of an unstable Pakistan, our relations with Afghanistan, and of course about Balochistan. You may have seen various of my shows on Balochistan, but today the attempt would be to delve a little deeper to understand what are the security ramifications and the stories of Pakistan, Balochistan and Afghanistan. Who better than Mr. Tilak Devasher? He's also a member of the National Security Advisory Board, someone who's got a vast experience dealing with Pakistan, looking at it in a very academic way also. Mr. Devasher, thank you so much for joining us. It's always a pleasure to have you. And luckily, today we'll have the opportunity to speak at length about not just the books that you've written, but also your trajectory, your growth trajectory of understanding these nations. Let me first begin by asking you, Mr. Tilak Devasher, that your interest in Pakistan, as I understand that there is a story behind it. Let's begin with that story.
First of all, thank you so much, Shravan, for calling me to your studio and having a chat. It's curious how I became interested in Pakistan. It was just coincidental. My father was an Air Force officer, and he would tell us stories about two Pakistan Air Force officers who were his flight commanders in the Royal Indian Air Force, flying Spitfires and Hurricanes over Burma during the Second World War. So, as a kid, you get interested. And then the wars of 1965 and 1971, my father was still serving, heightened my interest that, what is this country, what's it all about? In college and university, I studied the history of the partition and the freedom struggle. And I was more or less convinced I wanted to know more about this country that was carved out of India. During my professional career, I had an opportunity to study Pakistan in some depth. And after I superannuated, I have read even more on Pakistan than I did while I was serving or while I was in university. And the one thing that struck me about Pakistan was that most of the attention in India gets focused on the issues of terrorism,
right,
ceasefire violations, the stop go into Pak relations, the nuclear issue. But as a result, the real and serious problems of Pakistan tend to get ignored. So I decided when I superannuated, I was going to write my first book. I said I must study Pakistan off the beaten track, or not from the headlines. So I asked myself some very fundamental questions about Pakistan. That why is it such a troubled and troublesome state? Are its problems of recent origin, or they go back to its very genesis?
Right.
Why is it in danger of becoming a failed state, in danger of being called a terrorist state? So the search for answers to these led to the 4 books that I have written on Pakistan, looking for the in-depth and the fundamental causes of what makes Pakistan tick in different respects.
Was there anything that you would remember about your father essentially saying about Pakistan, which perhaps is something that you would still remember and would still have significance in today's time?
Nothing that comes to mind except, as an Air Force officer who was a fighter pilot, he was looking at Pakistan from very different lenses.
Right.
He was not a peacenik. But he knew these 2 Air Force officers, Air Marshal Asghar Khan and Air Marshal Noor Khan.
Right.
And he knew their capabilities, they knew his capabilities. 65 war, he was the Air Defense Commander in Ambala, directly supervising the attacks from and into Pakistan. So he would tell us stories, based on that, and especially with reference to Air Marshal Noor Khan, who was the Pakistan Army Air Chief at that time.
Right.
So, gradually, things he used to tell us about his experiences when they were together in Burma and flying for the Royal Indian Air Force.
Let's also now, look at how you have studied Pakistan, because as you rightly pointed out, for many of us who've had a close interest in Pakistan, it's always through the prism of counter-terrorism. It's also from the fact that what impact does it really have directly as far as India is concerned. What we often forget are the issues plaguing Pakistan, particularly when you would say Bijli Pani Sadak is or something that you would have never associated in your academic understanding of Pakistan. But in your book, you make a reference of that at length, why these key issues would have its ramification in the way Pakistan develops over a period of time. Not often do we really speak about it. So perhaps a good time to talk about
So the 2
this.
major things that I studied in my first book, Pakistan Courting the Abyss, was first I began with the Pakistan movement. That why was this need felt to carve territory out of India? So I studied the Pakistan movement and how the feeling of insecurity developed amongst a section of the Muslim elite in UP and Bihar, that they had become a minority. Not in physical terms, because they were always a minority, because they had lost power and privilege and patronage due to the long decline of the Mughal Empire and the coming into power of the Marathas and of the British. And especially when the British power grew, they realized that under one man, one vote representative government, they would be outvoted by the Hindus. You see, at that time, people didn't understand how this voting would work. It was presumed both by Sayyid Ahmad Khan and by Muhammad Ali Jinnah that all Hindus will vote for Hindus and all Muslims will vote for Muslims. And therefore, because the Muslim population was almost 1/4 of the Hindu population, they would never get anything in representative government. So this movement then fructified in 1906, when there was a delegation of Muslim leaders who went to Simla, met the Governor General and talked about separate electorates for the Muslims. The All India Muslim League was created in Dhaka, and then separate electorates. So these were the 3 initial steps that ultimately led to the creation of Pakistan. So this is one aspect that I studied in some detail. And what is the legacy of the Pakistan movement? You see, Pakistan was created in 47, but it didn't begin on a clean slate. It carried with it the legacy of the Pakistan movement. And one of the key factors of that legacy was the use of religion. You see, in the 46 elections, in the areas that the League claimed for itself in the West, the Muslim League had very little presence.
Right.
In Punjab, there was a coalition government of Hindus, Muslims and Sikhs. In the frontier, there was a Congress government, along with the Khudai Khidmatgars. Only in Sindh, the Muslim League had some presence. So how do you convince the Muslim population of these areas to vote for the Muslim League? So Jinnah sanctified the use of religion. So the slogan was Pakistan ka matlab kya? And the kalma la ilaha illallah. And the propaganda was that, look, if you don't vote for Pakistan, then you're not a true Muslim. Even when the contest was between two Muslims, it was billed as a fight between Islam and Kufr. The Muslim who was contesting against the Muslim League candidate was treated as a kafir. Now, once you let go of the religious genie, you take it out from the bottle, you can't put it back. And so Pakistan has developed that trajectory of the radicalization that you find in Pakistan today. It starts from even before the creation. So this was the impact of the legacy of the Pakistan movement. Then, of course, there were a couple of other things. For example, the total dependence of the Muslim League on the British. You see, the real fight for Indian independence was between the Congress and the British. The Muslim League was the beneficiary because they got Pakistan on a platter.
Right.
No Muslim League leader went to jail for demanding Pakistan. Whereas all Congress leaders, whether it's Gandhiji, Pandit Nehru, everybody else, Vallabhbhai Patel, everybody else spent years in jail, but nobody from the Muslim League went.
So do you believe, because in your book you also make a mention of the strand of insecurity that runs through Pakistan? So two things. One, does it have its own impact, the strand of insecurity, and why are they so very insecure? Second, which I also wanted to understand from you, was the fact that are there historical blunders that have been made by the Pakistanis in the past for which they are essentially suffering today? So the two aspects of insecurity and the blunders.
You see, the insecurity stems initially, as I mentioned, the insecurity amongst the Muslim elite,
right,
a section of the Muslim elite in North India, that they are going to become a minority because of representative government. After Pakistan's creation, the insecurity got further strengthened because the way the border with the Ratcliffe line was drawn, it did not have defensible borders. They found that a lot of the population centers of the newly created Pakistan, it was a flat terrain and they were close to the Indian border.
Right.
So, like Sialkot, Lahore, they were close to big population centers close to the border with India. And the way partition happened and the riots and everything, so the insecurity it got enhanced. So most of the attention went to defense of Pakistan, that India is going to undo. And this was the fear that was created, that India is going to undo partition. So, defense army has to be prioritized. So that was the question you mentioned about insecurity. The blunders were right from 47, on Kashmir. Pakistan had a standstill agreement with the Maharaja of Kashmir, and they should have waited for Maharaja to decide whether he wanted accession with India, accession with Pakistan, or what probably the Maharaja wanted himself was an independent state.
Right,
but they forced the issue. On 22nd October, the raiders were sent in.
And that's the fear on which the Maharaja worked also, that to protect.
Exactly, to protect himself, his people. So he rushed to Jammu and then he asked for Indian help. And interestingly, when the people say that it was a spontaneous effort by the tribals when they found persecution, the bulk of the killings that took place and the partition riots were in Jammu.
Okay.
The raiders went into Srinagar. Why? If they were so concerned about the killings and the riots, communal violence, they should have come to Jammu. Why Srinagar? There was nothing happening in Srinagar. One. Second, Iskandar Mirza, who later on became Governor General, he was a bureaucrat, and he was Deputy Commissioner in Peshawar. And sometime in February, I think it was 47, Jinnah called him and said, in case the British don't give us Pakistan, we'll have to grab Pakistan by the will of the Muslims. Therefore, you prepare tribal Lashkars to create trouble for the British, to tell them that we can't stay together. So, Iskandar Mirza actually created these Lashkars. They weren't used at that time because Britain agreed to partition. But they were used subsequently to attack against Kashmir. So it was not a spontaneous movement at all. It was well organized, well thought out. And Jinnah, sort of pretended that I must have nothing to do with this and my hands must be clean. Is a lot of nonsense.
What's the historical misunderstanding that even today, many of us in India still have with regards to the accession, particularly in Kashmir, the very fact that there is very little understanding of the fact that why the accession first of all took place and the need to accede with India. Is there a historical misunderstanding to that?
You see, the situation has been obfuscated by Pakistan for its own purposes by trying to throw doubt on the instrument of accession. The fact of the matter is that Pakistan sponsored raiders, so-called raiders. And if you read the book written by Akbar Khan, later Major General Akbar Khan, Raiders in Kashmir, he documents the steps by which the organized forces, they gave rifles to the raiders, they organized transport for them to go and attack. So they preempted, as I mentioned earlier, the Maharaja from whatever he wanted to do. See, as per the Indian Independence Act, it was the Raja or the king of the princely states who had the right. Right? So when Srinagar was, when they attacked from Muzaffarabad and they were coming from Uri and Baramulla, so that is the time when the Maharaja said that if he has to defend his people or save his people, save his kingdom, he would need help. So he asked for Indian assistance. And I think the Indian leadership then decided, fine, we will assist you, but you have to sign the instrument of accession, otherwise it will be an invasion. Now, how can India enter Kashmir without some cause or the instrument of accession? That's when the Maharaja signed the instrument of accession. I forget, I think 24th or 25th. And then the Indian forces went in and they threw out the raiders from outskirts of Srinagar and pushed them all the way out. So, but Pakistan has obfuscated this thing. It says that there was a spontaneous rebellion. The raiders went in spontaneously, and there was the sort of tout what's called the Punch rebellion. That also was instigated by them, that they created a free state. You know, so it's all been confused. And people today are not able to sift the chaff from the grain. Similarly, in Gilgit-Baltistan. Now, Gilgit-Baltistan was part of the territory of the Maharaja. And there's a very interesting story behind this. Initially, it was thought that the raiders will come successful. The British did not want that there should be a connection between India and Russia, because socialist influences all seeping through. So it's thought that Gilgit-Baltistan also will be part of Kashmir, which will go to Pakistan. When the Indian army stepped in and resisted and pushed the raiders out, there was a unit called the Gilgit Scouts, which was headed by Major Brown. Now, a signal must have gone to him, because on 29th of October, he revolted against the Maharaja's forces. He arrested Brigadier Ghansara Singh, who was the governor of Gilgit, arrested him, and then the area was handed over to the Pakistan came and took over the area. Pakistan realized it did not have any legal right in Gilgit-Baltistan. So in 49, they had a so-called Karachi Agreement, in which the Muslim Conference, Azad Kashmir government and Pakistan, they got together, and it was said that we would like Gilgit-Baltistan to be administered by Pakistan. Nobody from Gilgit-Baltistan was there.
It's more like more by chance, if I have to...
Yeah, no, it was deliberately done. Yeah. So no representative from Gilgit-Baltistan was there. Why are you handing over this territory to Pakistan? What local standard did Pakistan have over Gilgit-Baltistan? And later on, the person from the Muslim Conference who was supposed to have signed that agreement, in his book he says, I never signed it. So again, it was a total perfidy. But this is how that area became part of Pakistan.
Mr. Devasher, some of my interactions that I've had with Pakistani journalists who've travelled in Pakistan-occupied Kashmir, some say that, if you speak to some of the local Kashmiris, there is this understanding that, it's very natural for Kashmir to have been part of Pakistan, be it the climatic conditions or, for that matter, the fact that, it's Muslim dominated, etc. There is the obsession that they have had with Kashmir because there was something that was sold to them. Their understanding of Kashmir was completely different, and the Pakistanis do not really understand that it is perhaps a misunderstanding or a misunderstood policy to begin with. Is there anything that you would like to perhaps throw light on with regards to this obsession that the Pakistanis have had, and making it as simplistic as saying that Even the weather is very similar.
That's ridiculous. You see, this is current history, that it is a Muslim-dominated area, and therefore, as per partition, it should have become part of India. The fact of the matter is, Kashmir was the home of Rishi Kashyap, it was the home of Shaivism. It has had strong connections to India and Hinduism throughout millennia. Right? So, we also in India have forgotten this. How important Kashmir is to Indian civilization. We are looking only for the last 50, 60 years, or 100 years, 200 years. What about the millenniums before that?
And why do you think we forgot that?
Lack of historiography, lack of people coming up. Under the British period, this was deliberately underplayed. You had, two nations, it's all Muslims, things like that. It's only now that research is being done and people are talking about these things. They are not afraid to say that it was a Hindu kingdom. It was a Hindu civilization. Shaivism is the heart, the birthplace of Shaivism. Why have you forgotten that?
Was this a deliberate ploy of the British?
See, the British were, what is the British motivation? Divide and rule, divide to rule. They realized in 57 that if the Hindus and Muslims come together, it's a death knell for the British Empire. So whatever that kept the two apart, and then, you had Macaulay's famous minute.
Right.
So,
the dangerous one.
Yeah. So you created a class of Indians which wanted to be more British than the British. So in the process, everything Indian was denigrated. Everything Indian was looked up. Till very recently. Even post-partition, everything that was considered Hindu or Indian was looked down upon. It's only now that there is a revival of interest on our own history, on our own historiography, our own culture. And people are now, adopting a different line.
And when you see this historical understanding, our civilization goes it goes way beyond that.
Yeah.
The closer links that we've had with Afghanistan, that too, I think so, has been deliberately taken away from us. The very fact that our understanding of what many would say that, it's from the prism of the RSS, if the moment you speak about an Akhand Bharat and etc. of that. But there is a root to this entire civilization spanning, thousands and thousands of acres.
So that has happened. Why? Because history that is taught in the schools, you have so much of emphasis on the Delhi Sultanate. Right. Now in the whole of India, Delhi Sultanate was a small part. I, as a child growing up in school, was never taught about the Cholas, ruled for 2,000 years.
I had a very small reference though.
Paragraph or two.
Yes, a paragraph.
Vijayanagar, the Pandyas, we didn't talk about this. It's all Delhi Sultanate. I can tell you the names of all the Sultanate kings. But it was before that. Chandragupta Maurya, for example. Megasthenes, Seleucus, I think that was his name. He went and pushed the Greeks back with Chanakya and Ashoka. Buddhism spread to China and Afghanistan through Ashoka. His pillars, the Chinese pilgrims who came. So Afghanistan was very much a part and parcel of that extended Indian subcontinental culture. But that's all been buried and pushed underground. I mean, in Mahabharata, Gandhari comes from Peshawar. Right. You had very good and close relationship. But that somehow or the other is being revived now. For 2 centuries, they were the Hindu Sai kingdoms in Kabul.
And we never spoke about them.
We never spoke about them. They are the ones who resisted Ghazni and Gauri for 2 centuries. And they are links with Kashmir, they are links with Kannauj. I never heard of it until now.
Interestingly, during Mr. Devasher, I had a small sort of understanding of it during 2 stints that I've had in Afghanistan. I'll come to the closer links that we have had and how it manifests in today's time too. I'm talking about just about a few years back when I was in Afghanistan, and the fact that even that close link finds our trade routes, etc., and all that put together, there is a closer link that we've had with Afghanistan. I'll come to that, but the interesting part is also the current situation in Pakistan. And let me simplify this for all of our viewers, because one of my producers of my show actually ended up, when I was doing a show in Pakistan, this was the time when there was a lot of protests that were taking place on the streets of Islamabad. So the question that was asked to me is that, sir, ये कैसे हो रहा है? Like, how is it possible that, you know, people are up against the ISI, against the army? Because the understanding all this while that we've had, that, you know, it's blasphemous to even speak about the ISI or about the army. But the situation has been such that you do have a section, it could be the PTI supporters themselves, but things are changing. Or would you say, no, there's no change in Pakistan?
You see, it's a complex situation and a complex answer. The army has been the arbiter and the dominant force, political force in Pakistan for decades, right, if not since 47. So they do what's called political engineering. If they find that one government, you see, I sort of use this analogy that in the army chief's office there is a cupboard. Right? In the cupboard, they have different hangers. So one hanger is Nawaz Sharif, Shehbaz Sharif, Mariam, Asif Zardari, Bilawal Bhutto, Imran Khan. So when the army chief comes, he puts the old hanger back and takes out a new hanger. Chalo bhai, isko ab bana dete hain. So before 2018 elections, they decided that the PMLN has to go. You can't have the PPP back. So let's project Imran Khan. So the work had started even 2-3 years before. And they projected Imran Khan by one strong line, which is that everybody else is corrupt. And this is this man, knight on a white horse and shining armor, who will get rid of corruption and give Pakistan a new lease of life. The army did this propaganda. And that was extremely effective. Despite this, they had to do a lot of, army rigs elections in 3 ways. 3 phases actually. First is pre-poll, when they make alliances, get people to shift parties.
Right.
One is during polling, when they fiddle around with the results. Physically they fiddle around with the results, because the results go from booth to the presiding officers of that constituency. In that they fiddle around. And third is post-poll rigging, when again the elected MPs are broken up. So they did a lot of this rigging in 2018 and ultimately brought back Imran Khan. But didn't give him a full majority. He had to have a coalition, right? But they didn't understand Imran Khan's personality. The man is a megalomaniac. He thinks that he is God's gift to Pakistan. And he became a cult figure because of his cricketing background, because of his looks, and because of his speeches, the way he's charismatic.
And the West also, perhaps, the liking that they must have taken.
So initially nobody knew what he was like. Once the army realized 2 years down the road, see, the deal with the Imran Khan was, you look after economy and governance, we look after foreign policy, security, and take care of that. They found that he wasn't able to perform on the economy. The economy was really, in a bad shape. See, it's a very funny joke that, when he came, he said the situation is very bad, but aapne ghabarana nahi, he told the people. A year later, people said, in Punjabi, hunte sarnu ghabarande. Let us be frightened now because the situation was so bad. So the army realized, look, you can't let him carry on. Because if you do, the US was upset, China was upset. He went to Moscow at the time, when Russia invaded Ukraine. And when the US wanted some assistance, he said, absolutely not. Those kind of things. So, the army has got these smaller parties which support a coalition. So, a nod and a wink. And the opposition gave a no confidence motion and his government fell. He thought now the step is out of action. But they didn't realize on Imran Khan's self-belief, his confidence, his perseverance. He went on a tour of the country, raising consciousness and gathering vast support. He demonstrated how popular he was. And then the army was in a quandary, now what is to be done with this guy? Because the social media of the PTI and his own popularity. So then one thing led to another, and then you had that 9th May, when the people in Punjab especially attacked army installations. They burned the commander's house and they looted it, and Martyrs Memorial were destroyed. That's the time when the army decided that this man can never come back into power, at least not in the immediate future. So then, so many cases, they put him behind bars. they took away the symbol, they disqualified people, they forced people to leave the party, and things like that. So this is the political engineering that the Pakistan army does. And now, despite all that,
But are there any diminishing returns of this engineering?
because despite doing all this, the PTI who contested as independents got the maximum number of seats. Yet they managed to cobble together the PMLN-led coalition. So the army is diminishing returns primarily because of two things. One, social media, the power of social media. Earlier, electronic and print media could be controlled. Social media you can't control. And the PTI social media team is fantastic. Second, the demographics. You see, since 2018 elections to 24, about 18 million or 20 odd million new voters are there. That is just above the age of 18. And those between the age of 18 and 35 are roughly 44% of the electorate of 58 million. And these make an impact, especially in Punjab where elections are won and lost. If they go out and vote, because the margin of victories in these areas is very small.
Right.
So because of these two factors, unless the army indulges in mass scale rigging, and once these cases come out, and the court, a lot of people have filed appeals, and those appellate courts are looking into these allegations. So you never know how some people may win, some people may lose. So army is now finding it extremely difficult. And people are also saying that the army should stop doing it because if you pick up another Imran Khan, what is going to be the fate of Pakistan?
But do you believe this is going to die down because this mass uprising that you are really looking at, correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Devasher, did you see this in the past?
No.
So it does mean that you cannot quell this as the way the Pakistani army was really hoping that this is going to die down.
They can quell it by manipulation. You see, one thing that there has been very few mass movements in Pakistan. One mass movement was against Ayub Khan when he had to step down. There was another mass movement called the Movement for Restoration of Democracy in Sindh when the PPP had organized. There was at the lawyers' time, there was. But the kind of mass movement which has to be in Punjab to be successful. And then, of course, there was this PNA agitation against Bhutto. That's when Zia stepped in and staged his coup. So that kind of mass movement, they tried it on 9th of May, but because they attacked the army, it was quickly quelled. So I have not seen this kind of mass movement, but there is no doubt about the support that Imran Khan enjoys. He's a cult figure.
So it's not going to end anytime soon, you feel, because no matter how many
it can
cases...
dissipate. Fever pitch can be at a fever pitch only for
some time.
You can't sustain it, and especially because he's now out of action. His party is fighting amongst each other. The cases are going to drag on and on and on. So without his actual leadership and coming up, it could well dissipate, especially if the government is able to give some economic relief to the people. You see, his popularity was one part of the equation. The other part of the equation was the very adverse economic conditions. Inflation 25 to 30%.
Highest ever.
Yeah. And huge foreign debt. So, if those two combine, and if this government is able to ensure that there is some relief to the people, some economic development, some reduction in prices, especially of energy, situation came where people, television cameras would go on the street and they say, "Yahan bachon ko padhaएं, ya khana khaएं, ya bijli chalaएं, ya school bhejeं." So it was pretty bad even now. So the government has to give some relief. If the government performs and is able to give some relief, then that anger, which is manifested itself against the establishment and pro-Imran Khan, that could dissipate.
So herein comes the interesting concept that you brought in your book of what you coined as weep. And I want to ask you this, the reason being because the image that comes in from Pakistan right now, the anger, the palpable anger where you've seen people are fighting for food, for electricity, these are issues that Pakistan never perhaps thought much about it. And today I see when I speak to a lot of Pakistanis, they keep talking about the fact that forget about just the Kashmir issue. It is high time that we talk about bringing the food on the table. Hence I want to bring in that idea. What is this weep concept that you brought in to the book, in your book. And do you believe that somewhere down the line, no matter what, keeping in mind the economic condition, the mass uprising that has taken place, the dissatisfaction that the people have from the government and the disbelief of the Pakistani army, all that put together, it is quite a tinderbox that it's become?
Yes. Is it because the WIP stands for water, education, economy, population. So when I was studying Pakistan for my first book, as I mentioned, I first looked at the Pakistan movement and the legacy. And this was the second. These are the long-term, deeper factors, non-traditional security threats that eat the innards of a country. They take decades to deteriorate and take even longer to rectify. Take the case of water. In 1951, Pakistan was a water surplus country. Per capita, it had 3,000 to 4,000 cubic meters per capita, if not more. The Indus Water Treaty gave them 80% of the water of the Indus, and India only got 20%. So but because they had so much of water, they haven't managed or look after their water resources. So today, Pakistani think tanks predict that in the next 5 years, Pakistan will become an absolute water scarce country, which means less than 500 cubic meters per capita per annum, which is drought-like conditions in parts of the country. Now, you can have nuclear weapons, you can have China, you can have anybody. If there's no water, there is no life. And nobody's paying attention to this. There are people, there are think tanks who write about this intermittently, but at the governance level or even at the army, nobody's paying attention to this huge fundamental problem which is staring them in the face. For this, you need to have massive investments in lining the canals, building more dams, storing water when there is surplus during the monsoon months. And then Pakistan is affected with adverse climatic conditions. 2 years ago in 2022, there was this massive flooding, followed by shortage of water. This year, for the Kharif crop, for example, there is a 30% shortage in the sowing phase. Kharif sowing phase is from April to mid-May. If you have a 30% shortage for sowing, these crops are not going to get reaped.
Right.
It's a food shortage. As it is, Pakistan is importing about 3 million tons of wheat. And as the population increases and water shrinks, they're going to have to import more and more. So that was just one part of the problem, water. Look at population. Population is going at about 2.55%, the most in South Asia. They're already at about 240 million. I think another 20, 30 years, it'll be 300 million. How are they going to feed such a population? And this is something which is a long-term trend and so on, requires programs to curtail. Education. 50% of the school-going children in Pakistan don't go to primary schools. If they don't go to primary, they're not going to go to secondary, they won't go to higher education. At a time when global world is becoming more and more technologically advanced, their labor force, about 60% of the labor force, is either illiterate or has just done class 5. How are they going to compete? So I looked at these issues, and I said, wow, they're really sinking. And I've been writing extensively, I tweet on this all the time, but there is no reaction. Nobody's taking any.
But why so? The very fact that they do realize that this is going a little out of control and the situation is not what it used to be in the back, like during the Bhuttos, or for that matter, situation was very different when General Musharraf was in power. Things are not the same anymore, and it's only getting grave with every passing day. This could also mean it's not only trouble for Pakistan, it is trouble for the entire subcontinent. West perhaps is enjoying this moment because they may not be at stakes right now, keeping in mind the US withdrawal and all that put together. So where are we really headed towards? And is it only Pakistan's instability, meaning it's their own problem, does not mean anything for the entire subcontinent?
No, it does. But the deterioration happened even in Musharraf's time. It had started even before that. But, these issues take a long time to manifest themselves. As somebody said, when the well is dry, you know the value of water. Till it becomes dry, you think, pani to hai. Because the people who are taking decisions, the army, for example, the army gets bottled water. So do
from outside.
Yeah, leadership too. So it is not hitting them in the face now. You take a city like Lahore. Earlier, water was available at 40 feet. Today they have to bore, if they dig a well, 800 feet. Now it's starting to realize, but now it's too late because the water table has already been so badly exploited that you cannot replenish it. So that is one. People realize it. I personally think there is nobody in Pakistan today, and I'm making a very outlandish statement, who has either the vision or the understanding or the courage to do something about these issues. Everybody is talking about Imran Khan this, his wife is this, somebody, they're talking about peripheral issues compared to the colossity of the colossal problem that face them. So as I'm fond of using one phrase, Pakistan's response is tactical to a deteriorating security situation. The problems have gone way beyond them, and I don't think that anybody has the capacity to solve them.
Would you say that the recent foreign minister's statement about opening up the trade agreement or having trade with India is a changing sign, or would you say that these are desperate measures that they are making right now? And
I don't even think they're desperate, you see, because this is what? It's a trial balloon testing the waters within Pakistan. You see, the question of trade with India, who stopped the trade? Pakistan stopped it after 15th of August. They withdrew high commissions and stopped trade. So in a press conference, you say we'd like to start trade with India. What is India supposed to do? Rush to Wagah border to start trading? It's so stupid. You have to formalize the proposal, say that we retract from our earlier situation, earlier statement, that no contact with India till you reverse 5th August. You do that, you say that in an open manner or convey it. Then it's a serious proposal. Right now, I don't think that anybody in India is even looking at it.
But are we being a little, at the cost of sounding, at the risk of, getting a lot of backlash? And are we essentially becoming very aggressive towards our neighboring nations? And we have to, whether we like it or we don't, they are going to be our neighbors.
But tell me, if you tell me I don't want to talk to you, am I going to come to you and say, "Nee, please talk, please talk"? Why should India now go to Pakistan and say, you start trading? You stop the trade. You withdrew high commissioners. You've boxed yourself into a corner by saying withdraw what was done on 5th August 2019. The Indian Supreme Court has upheld it. So what are you talking about?
But what's the way forward, Mr. Devasher? How long can you really do this? I do understand that you cannot have any talks while you still have the terror camps operating in a different manner. If not the launch pad
That's the second problem.
There is another problem.
That's the second problem. The first problem is you have to break out of the box that you have put yourself in. They want, somehow or the other, India should give them a way out. India should come to Wagah and say, okay, let's trade Jappi Puppy all over again. It's not going to happen. They have to find a way. Their diplomats have to find a way.
And you don't see that happening anytime soon?
Certainly not in the immediate future. I mean, they just had their elections. We are having our elections. As and when the new government comes, maybe that's an opportunity to take a look at this. But at the moment, I think this just one press conference which the foreign minister makes is meaningless.
So there is nothing to worry for us?
Oh, there is. There is a lot to worry for us. I think there's a tendency in India, Pakistan is in a mess, so to become complacent and take your eyes off the ball. Pakistan may be in a mess, but where India is concerned, there is a lot of consensus on the way forward that India is the enemy. So we should not take our eyes off the ball. We must study what is happening in Pakistan, internal Pakistan, not just Indo-Pak or anything like that, or geostrategic situation. People are very fond of those interesting issues, but we have to get our fingers dirty and look at water. What is the wheat cultivation? How the exports going to be impacted by cotton? We have to really get into the nitty-gritty of Pakistan. That's one. Second, we also have to get out of the complacent mindset that Pakistan has survived crises before, it will survive crisis again. And even if there are crises, it will be contained within Pakistan. They will have no blowout as far as India is concerned. I'll give you a hypothetical example. What if 250,000 or 500,000 water and food refugees start marching from Sindh or South Punjab towards the Indian border? What will we do? How will we react? We need to think about these things. It may not happen, But, as a growing power, we need to war game and look at these kind of issues. Pakistan is going to become more dependent on China as the situation deteriorates. What form will the dependence take? Will China start sending their troops for the protection of their workers and their installations? There was a proposal from China to switch to yuan as a currency in Gwadar at least. Well, Pakistan has kept that at bay. So they're going to become more dependent on China. I don't see anything happening on the Indo-Pak situation, except we have to be careful and we must sort of learn or focus on management of relations to make sure the relations don't deteriorate further, because of the situation.
Would you say there are any red signs that we should be looking forward to?
Because whenever Pakistan has been in trouble in the past, they've shot their way out of trouble. So, whereas now, terrorism is at a low ebb because of the FATF and the Indian security grid is so strong. But look at the kind of drones. There has been an escalation in drones which are dropping drugs, currency, weapons along J&K and in Punjab. So, their attitude has not changed. Right? Except that they feel that they're not able to do what they were doing in the past, so they're looking for different means of doing it. So I think we can't be complacent as far as Pakistan's, and there is some sort of a triumphalism in India too, which you have to guard against. That Pakistan is at the weakest, and now is the time.
A little bit of more jingoism that we see when it comes to.
Yeah. So I have always felt that when your enemy is about to implode or going down the drain, and if it does, sit back and enjoy the show. And don't do anything that will sort of, help, alleviate the situation.
I want to ask you about the Guardian report, because a lot has been spoken about it. There's too much of mystery. In fact, when I wanted to, part of my show, I wanted to figure out whether I should do it or not. And I spoke to some of my friends within the intelligence community. Said if any person who has served in the RAW makes a statement like that, you should be doubting the person who's actually told you, because no RAW officer would have ever spoken to anyone like that. But having said that, there is a lot of speculation that is doing the round that yes, India's understanding or India's position on terrorists operating of Pakistan, or for that matter in any other country, has actually changed. It's no longer the India that what it used to be in the past. Is there any credence to the fact that yes, there is a possibility, because these are terrorists who've had cases here in India, and the fact that India does believe in having a slightly more muscular policy when it comes to dealing with terrorism? Is there any credence?
Yeah, so let's segregate the two aspects. One is the story itself. You would have read the story. What shocked me about the story was that the word alleged and allegations have been used 10 to 15 times in that article. Sometimes twice in one sentence.
That's a safer option, I must say, as a journalist.
So, but if you are a serious, a paper, as Guardian is, how can you publish a story which is based on allegations? First. Then, they mentioned the name of the research and analysis wing as R capital then AW. This is a typically Pakistani formulation, Ra. Nobody else everybody will say R and AW, which is the official designation. Makes me doubt who actually wrote the story. Is it a Pakistani handout? And third, initially they declared Pannu as one of the persons killed.
Yeah.
So what kind of fact check? I'm surprised that the Guardian's legal department let the story go. Somebody can challenge it and sue them, and they'll be in serious trouble. That's one part of it. Second part, Pakistan has a history of bumping off people who have lost their utility or have become uncomfortable for them. I'll give you 2-3 examples. Way back in 2003, they got rid of Azam Tariq, who had founded the Sipahi Sahaba Pakistan. He was a member of parliament, MNA. They killed him when he was encountered. Similarly, 3 people had set up the LashkarJhangvi, which was the even more extreme organization, anti-Shia organization. One by one, they bumped off 2 of them, Malik Ishaq and one other guy. The third guy, Akram Lahori, was recently released on bail. So they have had a history of doing it. And all these people had been identified, who have been these so-called unknown gunmen. All the people killed were identified, were known terrorists or handlers of terrorists were uncomfortable for Pakistan that they continue to survive in Pakistan. And then the biggest thing, what were they doing in Pakistan in the first place? After Pakistan said our territory is not being used for terrorism, how come all these guys are there? It's a nest of vipers.
They said that they are Islamic scholars.
The Islamic scholars, really?
That's what their position was on one of them who was actually killed.
And then again, one of the people identified, two people, Indians were so-called, were identified by the Foreign Secretary in a press conference in January. One of them, I saw him on TV the other day, who was a businessman, legitimate businessman working in Dubai. He said, I was shocked to read my name and the passport that was held out, and he's a bona fide businessman. So what evidence? And then the article says they have seen Pakistani documents, written testimonies, passports, WhatsApp messages. They produce them. What's stopping you from producing them?
So yeah, that's a question that I asked a lot of the Pakistani guests who were on my show, that you would have gone to the town by saying that, look here, this is the evidence that Pakistanis have the penchant to do that, even if there is nothing. They said, we've given a lot of dossier. I said, which dossier are you really referring to? Because right now, as I understand, there has been no evidence. In fact, they also make this claim that we have done a thorough investigation. When the first killing actually took place, they said, we have done a thorough investigation. The police is actually looking into it. Today, they make no mention of what has happened to the current status of their investigation. So that's quite bizarre. But having said that, Mr. Devasher, let me also ask you, these were people who were beneficial for Pakistan, especially in carrying out terror against India. Why would they be bumped up by the Pakistanis themselves?
Because they lost their utility. See, once you come into the limelight, once you're identified, you know you're a Lashkar recruiter, you know you've carried out attacks in India, your utility is lost. They become an embarrassment for you. So, it's a dirty game. Best thing is to, get rid of them. And then one other thing, the story mentions, the article says that we have seen transaction records. When you pay off somebody like this, do you send a bank transfer? What transaction record are you talking about? Is it a Hawala receipt? It doesn't happen. So this article is, to use a very strong word, trash. It's just not worth it. It got everybody excited, but then if you look at it in detail, and then you have the history of Pakistan bumping off its own people. Because if there was something to it, Pakistan would have gone to town. They would have prepared fresh dossiers. They would have told everybody, held press conference. Earlier, if you recall, the DG ISI and the foreign minister held press conferences when they accused India of being in cahoots with the TTP. This is when the Ghani government was still there.
Right.
They held these big conferences and showed all kinds of details, which was, of course, all nonsense fabrication. And then when the Taliban is in power, again they're blaming us for the TTP. So I think people who have studied this know the way Pakistan operates, and they get rid of their assets who have sell-by date is over.